Father's God, to thee, author of liberty. I pray you are having a wonderful holiday week. If you're taking some vacation, last Sunday was July the 4th, Independence Day in the United States of America, and we celebrated the 245th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, July the 4th, 1776. We are celebrating liberty, freedom, and as the Declaration reads, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You see, governments cannot grant those liberties. They're from God. Governments can only recognize and protect them, and sometimes they try to limit or even remove those God-given rights. That's why in the U.S. Constitution, the liberty we call religious liberty is embedded right in the very First Amendment as it reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." Well, Charlotte pastor James Emery White wrote in a recent Church and Culture blog that July the 4th always reminds him of times when he's traveled in countries where liberties have been severely curtailed, or where the people have been freshly freed from the chains of injustice, and the joy of their release was palpable. And his most powerful memory was a trip to Moscow, where he was teaching shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. He says, one night a group of us went to the famed Bolshoi Ballet. It was a long, wonderful evening, and after we took the subway back to where we were staying, the students said, "Come and let us celebrate." Well, the other two professors with me were as tired as I was, but the students were insistent that we join them, and so we went. And then we found out what celebration meant to them. They simply wanted to gather and sing hymns and worship God. And we did, late into the night, with more passion and sincerity than I'd ever experienced. It didn't matter that we didn't know how to sing in Russian. We just worshiped God together. A pastor told me it was only a few years ago that we would have been put in prison for doing what we did today. We were never allowed to gather together as a community of faith and offer worship to God. And we were just so happy, almost in a state of unbelief, that we can do this now together, publicly, that we didn't want it to end. And not knowing what the future might hold for us here, we know that every week might just be our last. So we never want to stop. We want to keep worshiping together as often and as long as we possibly can. Dr. White concludes, "I'll never think about worship the same again. I've been too casual about it, taken it too much for granted. These people know what it's about, what it's really about, and because of that, they've been willing and would be willing again to suffer for it, to be imprisoned for it, to die for it. It matters that much, and it should matter that much to all of us." Well, Dr. White is correct. We in America have taken our religious liberty far too much for granted. We need to wake up. Just this week, International Religious Freedom Ambassador Sam Brownback spoke about the horrific human rights violations being perpetrated by the Chinese government, especially toward religious minorities like the Uyghur Muslims, and in Sudan against the Christian minority by the majority Sunni Muslim government, and other places in the world. In fact, Open Doors International World Watch List reports that for each of the last several years, persecution of religious minorities, especially of Christian minorities around the world is the worst year on record. In other words, the intensity and frequency of persecution is getting worse each year. The Pew Trust polling information confirms this trend, indicating that most of the world's population lives in a country where there is significant religious persecution. In Canada, Christianity is increasingly the target of legal action and new laws restricting religious liberty. Here in America, we're seeing a dramatic surge in hostility against Christians and Christianity. It's very difficult for Christian students and employees to be open about their faith on school campuses and in the workplace. If laws and government are downstream from culture, then it's only a matter of time before the freedoms we have taken for granted, not only to worship without fear of government interference, but to live out our faith in public, to teach and communicate biblical truth without fear of government or other opposition, will be threatened in ways we've never before seen in this country. So where can we go? What can we do? Well, first of all, of course, we can pray. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Timothy 2, I urge you, first of all, to pray for all people. Ask God to help them. Intercede on their behalf and give thanks to them for them. Pray this way for kings, for presidents, and for all who are in authority so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. This is good and pleases God our Savior, who wants everyone to be saved and to understand the truth. So we need to be praying for persecuted Christians and other religious minorities in the world. You see, true religious liberty is liberty for everyone, everywhere, every time. So we need to pray. Secondly, watch. Pay attention to religious liberty battles, especially here in America. You see, if the United States is the leading light for religious liberty in the world, then threats to religious liberty here are threats to religious liberty elsewhere. Some good sources of information on this are the Colson Center for Christian Worldview and their Breakpoint resources, the Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, Beckett, Religious Liberty for All, and of course, Open Doors. Finally, worship. Hebrews 10:25 says, and let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near. You see, the most political thing we can do is to exercise our religious liberty by gathering together to worship and declare Christ is Lord. Worship together publicly. Well, I know it's been a real challenge in this past year with the pandemic, and I'm so thankful for and want to shout out a thank you to Ephesus Baptist Church's reopening team, who has led us through these past year plus time in enabling us to reopen first in-person worship and now more recently Sunday school, our Sunday morning Bible study groups. You may not be able to safely rejoin us yet, but as soon as possible, worship together publicly. Worship as though this opportunity to get together to worship might be your very last. I pray it's not, but it could be. I invite you now to join with me in singing, My Country, 'Tis of Thee. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims' bride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. My native country, thee, land of the noble free, thy name I love. I love thy rocks and rills, thy woods and templed hills. My heart with rapture thrills like that above. Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God our King. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrims' bride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. My native country, thee, land of the noble free, thy name I love. I love thy rocks and rills, thy woods and templed hills. My heart with rapture thrills like that above. Our fathers, God, to thee, author of liberty, to thee we sing. Long may our land be bright with freedom's holy light. Protect us by thy might, great God.